this video, I think it was great because basically what it is that this reporter is putting on like his reports on the Chapo trial, okay? Like what he was seeing, which is great because he was like one of those reporters. I think he's from the Proceso, and he's using AI basically, to put the videos together and do the transcripts and all that.
Hmm.
And it's a fairly new channel. And for whatever reason, like I have thought about so many things, but I never even considered to like going back and like reading all the transcripts from like Vicente's testimony and other people's testimony.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that'd be great. But um, of course, some of the things that really stood out to me is like some of the information that he gives, right?
Hmm.
And it's something that we're always talking about, and lately, man, I just see like what man, I keep up with all the news of Chicago. Just see everything that's happening around like the world, especially in terms of drug trafficking, and it's like here's this trial that if anyone were just to like read into it a little bit, it kind of just shows how trifling that life is.
Mm.
How like you there's just no chance for you to win. You know what I mean? And like I'm not saying that as an excuse. Like I'm not saying highlighting because some of the stuff they're talking about. I'm just saying that because like I'm glad that it came from me and my brother's heart, and that we were able to change our life and do the right thing. I didn't need to hear this. I didn't need to see this, but I knew it. And what makes all the difference is that to me, what was important, and chat, we talked about this, and everyone in the chat knows this, is that we always said like, look, we did it voluntarily. Like we took that. We took that leap of faith, and that's what I always feel like has made me and my brother like different. Um, but thank God that he gave us the strength and the foresight to actually do it. Right? We always pray and we want things to we pray for things, and sometimes we just want to see things our way. And for us, it was like us praying, for our family, our future, and their well being, and God gave us that answer in that way, you know, and now today looking back, it was like wow, I'm still surprised with some of the things I hear. So I thought it was important. I thought it was something cool to just like, you know, uh, react to, especially when you're getting, you know, that first hand conversation, that first hand like knowledge of what was going on the inside of the cartel, right? Especially the Sinaloa cartel, coming from, you know, the top, man in the cartel himself, right?
So, so this is the first time going through this. This is the first time you've come across this information in its entirety, or from this perspective, right?
In parts, I guess I'm looking at it in parts, and maybe
Because
I
you
could
did the
have.
book, you read the book, right?
No, I haven't read the book.
Oh,
I read some of it, but remember, I think the book was put out before the trial, if I'm not mistaken.
mm.
And you know what? It's weird because I didn't even see if that book actually came out, or I'm not sure if it was after the trial, whatever the case is, or before. Maybe it was put out after, but I didn't read it like point by point. And big shouts out to Annabelle Hernandez too. I met her recently. I did a long, extensive interview with her that should be coming out soon. Um, but I I had seen some transcripts, and I want to tell you, like I got them right away after like the trial was over. But I didn't really, maybe I forgot. Maybe it just COVID happened, and all that. So who knows? Maybe I just like it blank, just went blank on my mind. But hearing it again, it's surprising to me still. And I even thought about you, like that's something we should get, Shy, is the transcripts, and then go through them.
Just the whole thing, top to bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's only I think really I think it's like 13 important people that you probably would want to hear about.
Hmm.
13, 14.
All right, man. Whenever you ready, to get that shit popping?
January, Thursday, January 3rd, 2019. The return to the hearings was strange. We reporters did not understand why the jury did not accept that the first hearing of 2019 would be held until Monday, January 7th, as Judge Kogan had proposed. In any case, several of my colleagues decided not to return to cover the trial until Monday. It was nice to exchange greetings and good wishes with bailiffs Adam and Carlos Panda, with whom I joked and who discreetly passed me sweets so that I would not nod off from the anesthesia of boredom. It is the formula for not falling asleep, the strong Adam had confessed to me. Sembrino's rest had been good for all of us. Valorizo and Purpura seemed happy, as did Lichman, who usually did not get along with his two colleagues. Vicentillo is
Side note, um, Perpetua, what's his name? How do you say his name?
Who?
He was at Arturo Alfredo Beltran's attorney as well, and he represented a lot of high ranking cartel members out of that case out of DC. And Lickman, Jeffrey Lickman, great attorney. He represented John Gotti Jr. He also represented me. Then went on to represent Chapo, and now and Emma, Chapo's wife, and now he represents both Joaquin and Ovidio Guzman in their case. Um, yeah. So ironically,
coming. Valorizo told me as I shook his hand and wished him a good day. That was news indeed. I regretted that Keegan Hamilton, the reporter for B, was not present. He had told me that he would not miss Vicentillo's testimony.
a news reporter, Keegan Hamilton, man, I will say, look, I met him a few times. I've worked with him, collaborated recently on a really big project that's going to come out soon. Um, he's one of those, journalists that have gone to extreme measures to like get real in-depth stories and right highlight. And I really think he's an expert when it comes to the Sinaloa cartel and Mexican cartels in general. He's now I think he's head of a division for the LA Times. But he covered the Chapo trial. And he also had a podcast. It's called I think it's called The Trial or something like that. Trial of the Century or something. Keegan Hamilton. You could find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And Valerie and Vivi actually were guests the week of when actually Peter actually testified on the trial by chance, by coincidence, because we didn't have a known date or anything like that. So
Suit, white shirt, and blue tie. Chapo
okay, that right there is like a chubby version of Chapo.
That's an AI picture, ain't it?
'Cause trust me, I knew he was looking chubby at the trial. I mean, I didn't see him. My brother saw him, but I just don't believe he was looking chubby like that.
entered the courtroom with a big smile. He stood, as he almost always did, on Valorizo's left side. He gave him a big hug and honored his three lawyers. He addressed Lickman and Purpura in English. Happy New Year. The capo was exultant. Andrea Goldbard took the stand and called America Pina, an officer with the New York State Metropolitan Bureau of Prisons, as a witness. The official monitors emails and calls that inmates receive or do not receive. The official presented a recorded call from Chapo and an email he sent to Emma, nothing incriminating. You may call the next witness, the judge ordered the prosecutor, Amanda Liskam, who had risen from her chair.
I called her Amanda Liskama. I thought that was her name. I'm not sure if they're correct or I'm wrong. Liskama. I think it was an A at the end, but very intelligent woman. She's out of DC after the a dangerous crime section of the Department of Justice, and she was one of the prosecutors in these big cases, including Alfredo Beltran's trial. So I worked with her. Smart man, a smart woman. I would say that. Her and all the team, I guess that worked on these trials, and I think they came, really prepared. So um, uh, I'm not sure she's still there or not, but man, she did a great job.
The prosecution calls Vicente Zambada Niebla, Your Honor, Liskam said. The door on the left side of the courtroom opened and the son of El Mayo Zambada entered. El Vicente was dressed in blue prison overalls. Underneath his short-sleeved shirt was a long-sleeved white shirt. The witness turned to look at El Chapo, who smiled at him and bowed his head slightly in greeting. The defendant stared at him but did not return the courtesy. Now 43, El Vicente looked haggard, and although his hair was cropped short, his gray hair was evident. Rio's baggy clothing and the tennis shoes he wore no longer showed the young, dark-haired athlete I had seen in Chicago in 2002 and 2013 during the preliminary hearings for his trial, which ultimately did not take place because he had declared himself a cooperating witness. Quote, "He still looks very good, a little haggard, but it makes sense, he's a prisoner." Marissa would tell me minutes after the hearing ended. She introduced herself. Jesus Vicente Zambada Niebla said that he understood English, but preferred that the interrogation be carried out in Spanish because it is his native language.
Something to point out, Shai, I'm not sure if you recall, but I'm sure everyone else, if you guys been keeping up with this content, is that everyone always talked about how his appearance, how he looked, that he was dressed, pretty boy, good looking, handsome dude, And to me, it's always like, well, it's that profile that people kind of put on how someone should look, right? Um, and they still highlight that. Of course, when you're in those situations, especially, you could imagine like what type of the process to actually get to that witness chair, what it took. I know this because of my brother, but you're gonna be put in solitary confinement. You're already nervous. You're a nervous wreck. You're about to go and spill your guts out. And he probably hasn't eaten. You're not gonna be your best self. You're at your worst. But he's only 43. It's not like he at the time he was actually testifying, so it's not like he was old or anything. But he's a very intelligent individual. Like, by any chance, I know he had studied and in the university, and he traveled the world as well, right? So he was smart. I think a lot of people are taken back because they always expect what they believe to be these cartel members are the people that you see, wearing these, utility vests and masks, right? And then you see someone like that, and they're taken back. But there's more of him that are important people than what people, believe what a cartel member is, right?
He added that he studied until high school and that he was born and raised in Culiacan, Sinaloa. Who is his father? What does he do and what nicknames does he have? Quote, the prosecutor asked. Ismael Zambada Garcia is the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. They call him El Mayo, Padrino, La Doctora, La Señora, and those closest to him call him Mi Compadre Chapo, La Cocina. That is also his code for phone and radio calls. At that moment, prosecutor Liscam projected the cover of issue 1744.
Hey guys, I don't know what the last one meant.
Mi Compadre Chapo, La Cocina.
So they say La Cocina. I never knew that.
The kitchen. I heard somebody call him Mario the other day on a reputed, a well-known website. So
I never heard of Mario either. So I'm not sure if that could be. It's different because he's speaking about his code word, like when they would communicate. So that's a little bit different. But Mario, I mean, I don't know. I mean, somebody could call him whatever they want, but that's not. That's something else. So just so everyone else, like, the way they interact from office to office, or like especially for radio communications, phone communications, right? They're gonna switch up the code words, right? And for instance, for us, Maya would have been like mi papa, or like my aunt, or la tía, like my aunt, in Spanish, right? Mi tía, whatever. Or we could also say mi papa, like we'll call him dad or whatever. So it just also depends, right? What was the circumstances? So
that is also his code for phone and radio calls. At that moment, prosecutor Liscam projected the cover of issue 1744 of the magazine Proceso, in which El Mayo appears hugging Julio Scherer Garcia, founder of the weekly. Dated April 4, 2010, that cover continues to be the most recent image of the capo. The prosecutor asked him what his work was in the Sinaloa cartel.
At that point, there's actually no real pictures of El Mayo out. They showed a picture of Proceso magazine. And at that time, they didn't have no like real picture of El Mayo other than sketches. And I was mentioning that I remember like driving through Arizona and California, and there would be like wanted pictures with his reward on there of the sketches. And at that time he would continue, like back in 2003, 4, and probably later on after that, but he would always appear on America's Most Wanted, like I'm guessing at least every show they will pass a little bit, like 5-second clip of it if you don't have any information about him. Um, so yeah, so it was a big deal to when we actually did that interview. People always are asking why did he do it, and to me, I felt like it was an interview, and he decided to take that picture. It was for his son. It was for Vicente. He did it for Vicente just to so Vicente could have a picture of him, and and get a message or whatever he actually said in the interview. So yeah. So we're gonna.
Of coordinating drug shipments from South and Central America. He had to ensure that the loads arrived safely first in Mexico and then at the border with the United States. He was the link between his father and the Sinaloa cartel's international partners. I also received the money in Mexico from the sale of drugs. Were you in charge of making payments for corruption? I was also in charge of making payments to police officers on behalf of my father and my friend Chapo. What nicknames do you have? El Niño 10, Diego the waitress, but he didn't mention the one you're best known as, Vicentillo. I was struck by the tone of respect, almost adulation, with which Vicentillo would say, my friend Chapo.
I think my friend, I think he was using mi amigo Chapo. I think he kept calling him mi compadre. Okay, and translation is my friend. Shy. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing he would call him mi compadre because they're compadres. Um, and so the nicknames in there, I think he said it was his code name for like communication wise is 10. Um, he's famous in Mexico for being El Niño, which means the son. Basically, he's Simba in Mexico, and there's so many songs about him. And well, there was one other nickname I seen that were mentioned about him. There's another nickname mentioned about him, but we called him Treinta. That wasn't his number, but the reason it was our number towards him because first of all, we didn't want to use the same code that everyone else used, and it was because there was like an inside joke, between us that we'll expound on a, later on. But um,
No
yeah,
mames, way.
but Vicentillo was Vicentillo was like something that everyone in the game almost called him, you know, out of out of respect. You get me?
Just to so people don't let that get past them. This interview was a big deal. You're talking about a man that the untouchable, the untalkable, the unseeable. You know what I'm saying? And people wondered why he put himself in a position doing this interview with this respected journalist. And what Jay said, what Jay's opinion is, just to nail that home, is that this is a message to his son. You know what I'm saying? So that's how deep the shit get, that the man make a decision like that on some doing it for his son. Now that's different than him turning himself in, all these years later because he wants to see his son. That's some different shit. He's like, I gave you the interview, we good. But I just wanted to paint that picture clearly. We have a video, if you look in Cartel Chronicles, where we covered that and we talked about that. And we talked about Jay's opinion that it was a message to his son.
Yeah, I think because he didn't. There's no picture. He always was in hiding, right? He was like someone that people knew existed, but you never seen him. And I think that for that Proceso interview, I think it was a perfect timing for him, um, for his son to have something of him, and him kind of send him those like cold messages. But at the same time, I know that he gave another interview, which was I don't even know if it was like a real interview or not, to his daughter, right? To this journalist's daughter, who's very respected, who was I guess he was one of the person that started Proceso, right? Magazine, and he since has passed. But I have to assume that there's some type of relationship there, like long term relationship between families or something like that, in order for him to actually had done that interview. So
Payments to police officers on behalf of my father and my friend Chapo. What nicknames do you have? El Niño 10, Diego the waitress, but he didn't mention the one you're best known as, Vicentillo. I was struck by the tone of respect, almost adulation, with which Vicentillo would say, my friend Chapo, always looking for him with his eyes as if seeking the defendant's approval. Perhaps these were the secret codes among true Mexican drug lords.
I want to highlight something. That this is something me and my brother talked about. I think I talked to you about it, Shy. Is that reporter, like for instance, whatever. It's like this for me and my brother. Like people don't like us because we're. I don't know if it's that we're too young or we come off like whatever, like you know, like we come off just wrong or people just don't understand us. But if you recognize this, that he said, "Oh, I was taken back by the respect they have for each other, the respect that these killers, bosses just communicate with each other, even though they're in the stand. He's giving his compadre this respect, you know." This is the same dude that I think said that when my brother took the stand, he didn't think it was as important. You get me? Even though in the trial it states that it was the first time they ever heard Chapo's voice on on a recording. You get me?
Right. They
You know,
downplayed it.
yeah. It's like it's that admiration that we always talk about. Is like where you stop thinking that these people are just people and you start giving these people like superpowers, right? And like you put them in this like circle of like, oh my god, he calls me compadre. Just want to highlight that. And it's the media that makes these people be that way. And then the media plays this out in in on the news and in videos on social media, YouTube, wherever, right? In magazines and newspapers, and then that comes off, and then next thing you know, you're public, right? It rubs off on the public, and then it rubs off on society as a code, the culture, and all these kids in the street and so on, right? And then they want to go blame hip hop or music. You know what I'm saying? Like for having an input, So that's something that we could get into later on about this whole, the Mexican government, the U.S. government, like, putting all these restraints and corridos, and it's like you want to put on restraints and corrido, and you give these people the ammunition and the damn weapons to kill each other, with your corruption, like that's a slap in the face. You worried about corridos, yeah, you on the payroll, like what? It's just like insane, but just it's just I guess like the politics of what the media world is, right?
This scam wanted to know what benefits a person gets from drug trafficking. You make money, a lot of money. With money you gain power, you corrupt, and there is jealousy that is what makes wars. What drugs does the Sinaloa cartel handle? Cocaine, heroin, ephedrine, and marijuana. Since the 80s, who have been the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel? Compadre Chapo and my father, he immediately said without hesitation. Then he added, Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Arellano Felix brothers, the Beltrán Leyva brothers, Juan José Esparagosa Moreno, El Azul, and Nacho Coronel.
I was a little bit like here, like I don't know if it was a mistake, but that they mentioned who were the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel. And they mentioned the Arellano Felix brothers, who, for the most part, to me, weren't involved in the Sinaloa cartel. Um, they were involved like in the earlier, days in the Guadalajara cartel, right, or the super cartel, whatever you call it. But I was a little bit like surprised that he mentioned them.
What was the relationship between these people?
Social relations.
When did you meet Chapo Guzman?
In the late 80s, early 90s.
You know what? Before I go on, this is if you pay attention, right? This is what's insane. If you look at this, the Chapillos is the family, right? Miles' family, Felix Gallardo's family, like all these people that we're talking about, like what the cartel was, were family members, even to this day, right? Which you see, the people fighting, but the cartel kind of stood, so strong because of all that family, like structure. With like, for instance, you see that in Felix, we know that they've been a little bit more famous as a family with so many leaders, but same thing with Chapo and his brothers and his sons, and Mayo and his brothers and his son, and so on El Azul with his sons, you know, and then the grandkids that came after that, um, with Amado Carrillo with his brothers as well, and Arturo Beltrán Leyva and all his brothers. You know, the Beltrán Leyva organization. It's like it's their family. You know, um, and that's what my brother and I knew the cartel to be. Not just a business, but it was a family. You know, it was organizations built out of families and cousins and cuñados and stuff like that. You know, and anyone that had connections to the families.
People.
Social relations.
When did you meet Chapo Guzman?
In the late 80s, early 90s. He went to my father's house to visit him. I was 15 or 16 years old. There were other people at the house, my father's security guards. Why do you refer to the accused as compadre or compa Chapo? A friend because he is my youngest son's godfather. How many times has Guzman seen him in person? I've seen him hundreds of times. The Vicentillo gave the impression that he was happy to see his friend and even to be testifying at the trial. Guzman was focused on the jury. The most anticipated witness at the trial was arrested in March 2009 in Mexico City and later extradited to the United States. He is accused in courts in Washington, D.C. and Illinois of criminal conspiracy to import thousands of kilos of cocaine. His possible punishment ranges from 10 years to life in prison. My guilty plea was in 2013. Added the Vicentillo, whose unshaven beard painted a leaden face. What obligations do you have to the prosecution as part of your cooperation agreement and guilty plea? To provide any information.
Requested. What hopes do you have with this cooperation agreement? A reduction in my sentence. The prosecution has not offered me anything in exchange for my testimony in this trial, so why are you testifying? Because of the commitment to provide the information in case I am needed and because I believe it will help reduce my sentence.
Just to point something out, this was 2019. Yeah, it was 2019 that he's testifying, and he was arrested in 2010. He pled guilty in 2013, so he still hadn't been sentenced. He's not going to be sentenced to a year after this. So it doesn't always happen like right away. And I know that you see all the stuff that's going on with Ovidio, that, oh my God, even journalists get it wrong. Like, oh, he's pleading guilty because he has a cooperation agreement. Like, yeah, he's going to plead guilty and you're not going to see nothing about his cooperation agreement until he gets sentenced. And that could be, in 10 years, once the government feels like the public has forgotten a little bit about him, and once they feel like he has enough time, he's done enough time, for him to actually get the credit. So he would have to, testify against people, and people would have to be, plead guilty and get sentenced, or get found guilty, right? So in order for them to go to a judge and say, look, he deserves, a deduction, just like what happened to Vicente. And another thing I want to highlight is that no doubt to me that Vicente at this time, and to my brother, he was the third in command of the Sinaloa cartel. He wasn't fourth, he wasn't fifth, he wasn't, he was the third in command. And at the same time, me seeing third just so that people could understand and visualize it. But it varies depending on the situation. He had ultimate power as well. There was no difference between Chapo, Mayo, and him. And Shai, you could understand. We spoke about this all the time. So
I've heard you say that. I've heard you say that he was a boss. That he wasn't just like some junior. He was a boss.
Out of respect, yeah, we're gonna hear him talk about certain things, but I mean, he was a boss. He didn't have to ask for permission for anything. So so even though he's stating that, we still have to kind of like hopefully you guys, who are listening could actually understand that part, that he's kind of downplaying himself as well, or maybe, for whatever reason.
How much money is the fine that you must pay to the United States? $1.373 billion. With your cooperation agreement, you obtained some immigration benefit. For my family, so that they could come to the United States and they are here for safety. You made other promises in exchange for your cooperation? No. The witness emphasized that his name remains on the list of the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the Department of Justice for being a significant foreign drug trafficker. He claimed that he lived in Mexico in his homeland, but that starting in 1994 he alternated between Culiacan and Cancun. The prosecutor presented a map of Quintana Roo and asked the witness to indicate where Cancun was on the map. The years take their toll. Zambada Niebla put on glasses to comply with the request for a list. He revealed that at that time the person in charge of the Cancun Plaza, which was controlled by Mayo, was Javier Diaz, Vicentillo's brother-in-law. The prosecutor wanted to know who Diaz reported to. The witness confessed that he reported to his father, El Chapo, and Amado Carrillo Fuentes. What relationship, if any, did you have with Amado Carrillo Fuentes? He is my friend. He is the godfather of my eldest son.
Okay. Before we move forward, just quick overview of what he just said. It kind of shows that the government is willing to negotiate. When you have good information, you're important enough, they're willing to negotiate all kinds of different things, like your visas for your family, even wipe records down. They'll let you keep a substantial amount of money. Um, it all depends, right? Everything's on the table. And for Vicente and his family, I think he was able to take his wife off the Treasury blacklist, which was important. And I know he's going to speak a little bit briefly about how they let his family come into the country with money. And I'm sure there's other benefits and stuff like that he could have received. But the most important benefit that he's looking for is going home to his family, which he ultimately did receive. Going home early, right, and going home with a visa at that. Because he was an American citizen. So,
What happened to Javier Diaz?
one of the things that I respectfully like, and I'm going to mention this, is that Amado Carrillo Fuente, which was Dolores Sky, was the godfather of his oldest son, who sadly passed away because of an accident. I think his son was like 6 years old or 7 years old or something like that at that age. He was named after him. So yeah, that was Dolores Sky was his actual godfather. Um, On a side note, I'm gonna say this, and hopefully I don't get in trouble by quality control. Vicente, for many years, he wore like probably like a 10, 12 carat round diamond, clear diamond. I'm talking about the diamond back then was probably worth 2.5 million dollars or whatever, but he wore it as a pendant that the Lord of the Skies actually gave it to him as a gift. So.
Who is Jesus Zambada Garcia? The king. My uncle. What did King Zambada do in the Sinaloa cartel? He received cocaine for the cartel. What did you do after
Another thing, his brother-in-law was a beloved member of the family, and he was really close to Vicente. Vicente really respected him, and the Real Felix organization murdered him, and that's why it's kind of hard. I just don't ever see that Real Felix and Mayo Zambada ever like just calling things a truce, because it's like so much bad blood. There's so many other stories that I could go into between families and families that got really reckless, got really violent, and they killed a lot of family members and good friends of one another. So deep rooted problems. I don't ever see them, just saying it's okay. We're gonna let things go. But this is what basically the Mexican justice have been.
Coordinating drug shipments in Cancun. My father asked me to go to Culiacan because the war against the Arellano Felix had begun. He explained to me that the Arellano Felix had promised to kill more members of our family, including me. Vicentillo reported what everyone knew. His father taught him what he knew about the drug trafficking business, and it was with the authorization of the mayor that Vicente participated in meetings with the other cartel partners. Was there any reason why your father wanted you to get involved in the drug business? Yes, because I was the firstborn. Regarding the cartel's operational structure, the witness said that the group had offices in different cities in Mexico. He was in charge of the one located in Culiacan, which he shared with Juan Guzman Rocha.
All right, just that says everything. Okay, Culiacan being the capital of what the drug cartel world has been for decades. Of course, there's been different cartels that are strong, but as part of the Sinaloa cartel, the Pacific cartel, like that's like the prize, right? Plaza to have, and he was in charge of it. Well, the next person he's gonna mention here is Juancho, and um, it's laughable because we've talked about people like El Primo, right? From Detroit, and different people that come in and say how there are these big figures in the drug cartel and this and that. But as Vicente is going to mention in this at trial, is that the organization as a whole, which was like the executive staff, it's not big, but right here he mentions Wancho, who was a very good friend of my brother and I, who was a associate of ours, who was a supplier, a friend, and who was Chapo's cousin. And to us, Wancho was actually the head of operations, then the plaza leader for Culiacan and Sinaloa, and and he represented Chapo, and um, together Vicente and Wancho, uh, being part of like we were like really close to them, like there are like we spoke to them every day, and we had a really good friendship with them. To my brother and I, understanding this and knowing this firsthand is like it kind of almost gave us that like extension, that power, by extension, that we were basically you know a chirp away or a message away from being connected to the biggest drug cartel, and having connection all around the world just by our association and our friendship with these two individuals.
Chapo's cousin, who is also identified with the code name Virgo. What will Virgo do for the accused? He was my friend Chapo's cousin and his right-hand man. Who did Virgo report to? My friend Chapo and my dad. Over time, Vicentillo stated that Chapo replaced Virgo as his right-hand man with Damas or Lopez.
Oh, one thing I forgot was that El Rey, he's calling, what does he call him right here?
This your show. Don't ask me no fucking question.
We sent his uncle El Rey. I would tell you something. That El Rey was something else. It was really important to me for me to do business with people I was like I liked. I associated with him. I did business with him, but he was not. He was very different from his brother. I'll tell you that much. A couple of times I had to complain, and I remember I told Vicente, that his uncle was an asshole, and he's like, like, okay, tell me something I don't know, like, okay, too bad, whatever, and he would never disrespect his uncle, whatever, but he was not someone I cared to do business with, and he was very difficult to deal with. Um, and the next person is gonna be Damason Lopez, who kind of fit in the same profile, but I will say this: early on, my brother and I seen the like jealousy between Damason and like, or the rivalry between Damason and like Wancho and all the other group. Because now in hindsight, I realized that maybe Damason and other members of the cartel knew that Juancho and Vicente and other like high ranking members that were close to Chapo that we were associated with didn't like really care for them, or didn't like, like didn't like them, these were people that Chapo was bringing into the organization that the people that were already there for decades didn't care for. And maybe their intuition was right, because ultimately, like, Damaso's gonna play a big part in the murder of Wancho, by his own cousin, which was Chapo.
Nunez, the lawyer. What did the lawyer do for the accused? He was in charge of people, coordinated drug shipments and corruption payments. Did Mr. Belizardo have other nicknames? Question mark. It was his code name for the radio.
When was the last time you saw Damas?
Months before he was arrested in 2009. Regarding the relationship and war with the Arellano's Felix, the Justice Department's star witness mentioned that they were the owners of the Tijuana Plaza and that in the 80s he accompanied his father to several meetings with them. For that reason, he personally met Benjamin, Francisco Javier, Ramon, and Eduardo. He noted that the Sinaloa cartel's decision to leave occurred in 1993 due to disputes with Chapo.
Shy, like I see this picture, right? And for so many years, Javier had this picture up in his wall, of his family that he would look at all the time. And he said he didn't have many pictures like this, but he really, missed his family, and there was times where we'd be having a different conversation, and he'd be leaning over the counter, and we would look at the picture, and he would just start like talking about different stories. Now Javier was the individual right here with next to the lady, next to their mom, I believe. Could you see the he's the one with the gold pendant in the front sitting down? That's him when he was younger. And it's kind of crazy to kind of see this.
Did you ever speak with Chapo Guzman about what happened in 1993 at the Guadalajara airport? It was mentioned in a meeting in the mountains. The matter was brought up because a cardinal had died, and every anniversary of the murder they talked about it, that he blamed my friend Chapo, and he said that he didn't kill the cardinal. Vicentillo revealed other details of Chapo's other fights with the Beltrán Leyva faction, whose gunmen, in an encounter with those from the Sinaloa cartel, wounded a cousin of the capo who was born in La Tuna. Mexico was very hot. My friend Chapo went to Guatemala to hide, but he was arrested. The government betrayed him, a colonel betrayed him. He also created close bonds of friendship with other relatives of the accused, for example, with Arturo Guzman, who was the godfather of one of his sons. My friend, the chicken, he emphasized. The Guzman-Laura brothers, according to Vicentillo's account, were very close.
The AI is skipping around, right? Because they started talking about the Beltran labels and stuff like that. But that's why I think it'll be great for us to look at the transcripts. But El Pollo, Chapo's brother, I never got to meet him because, as you recall, on the book Cartel Wives and the podcast, we mentioned that he says, I just lost my brother. This was like a few months, when I actually started, when I first met him, he had just lost his brother. So, also compadre, and he had baptized one of Vicente's other sons. So in Mexico, like it was real important, like if you were in, for you to, have one of these guys baptize your kids. And I remember even Chapo asking, like, we're gonna become compadres and stuff, and I remember like later on, like me and Peter and our, and the girls talking about it, like it almost like when we were there, it almost was like tempting, and was always like like damn, that would be crazy, to have these people like baptize your kids, but at the same time, we always be like, that's the worst shit you could do. You get me? To your own kid, like, and, we are religious, but at the same time, it's like most of them do. People do it for clout. You get me? Shy. And it's like who would we? Like it's weird because we were in and we would actually think about it, but then at the same time, we'd be like, yeah, all right, we took that seriously.
That's why, when Chapo was arrested in Guatemala, the chicken and his cousins Arturo, Alfredo and Hector Beltran Leyva, in addition to the Mayo, took over his businesses. My friend Pollito lived in Acapulco. Arturo Beltran Leyva controlled that area. He recalled, adding that El Pollo and El Mayo were also friends, since Chapo's brother was godfather to one of the sisters when she turned 15. He mentioned
That I didn't know. So I guess El Pollo was the godfather of one of Mayo's daughters.
death of Amado Carrillo Fuentes in 1997 as a turning point for the drug trafficking. El Mayo authorized his people in charge of relations with the Juarez cartel, Armando El Corral, to reach an agreement with the viceroy. The prosecutor, copying her colleague's strategy of jumping between moments and dates, asked El Vicentillo about a meeting of drug lords held in Gomez Palacios, Durango, in early 2002, after Chapo escaped from the Puente Grande prison. We met Arturo Beltran Leyva, Miseroy, with Chapo and my dad at a house we owned, the witness said. At that meeting, Vicentillo said that the drug lords agreed on cooperation in the purchase of Colombian cocaine and on the restructuring of control of the markets as a result of Amado Carrillo's death. When did the relationship with Vicente Carrillo Fuentes change? Early 2003. What significant event occurred in 2004? Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes was killed. Who made the decision to?
As you recall, remember that conversation we had with Primo, where he had all his dates all messed up. This was the initial war like that started with between the Juarez cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, and it was because of this man on the screen, Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes, which was Amado Carrillo's brother. He was in charge of the Well, he was in charge. They control Juarez, but he represented the Juarez cartel in Sinaloa, and from my understanding, he still wore that like shirt or whatever of his brother, and he was a killer himself, and basically he thought he was the boss of a boss of bosses like his brother was, and he would pick up people and tie them up and torture them or kill them. That there were people who were representatives of the Sinaloa cartel, and that became a big issue. But the biggest issue was going to be that Chapo that he denied Chapo a handshake, and that's going to ultimately lead to one of the deadliest wars between the Sinaloa cartel and Juarez.
That's crazy. That goes to
Kill
what
Rodolfo
Rome.
Carrillo
That goes to what Rome had asked you. You know what I'm saying? And what you told him. He said, "Is it the money?" He said, "Man, f- the money, f- the business. It's stupid shit like handshakes."
Yeah, and, something to just point out is that no one was ever short of money, Shy.
Mm-hmm.
Like money wasn't the problem. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're very like everyone who was in part of those organizations, especially the bosses and these people. Like money to them is different. You lose here one day, but tomorrow you make more money than anyone would ever see in 20 lifetimes. It's different. You get me?
Right.
So money wasn't an issue. Like I tend to like, oh, whoever controls the trade controls the money. That's BS. You know what I mean? Their money's different. One handshake, one deal is like enough money for a lifetime for anyone. You get me?
Mm-hmm.
Fuentes, my father and Chapo. The witness identified the black man and the ghost in charge of Guzman's security as the executioners of Becerro's brother. They killed him because they had problems with Chapo's people who operated in Abelardo. Rodolfo's
The person that actually killed, basically gave the last shot to Rodolfo was actually Chapio Lomas, who we talked about in the book, who was an associate of ours, who actually was the one that kidnapped my brother at the time. So
gunmen were killing Chapo's people and those they wanted to get out of the territory. Vicente Zambada Niebla stated that before the murder occurred, he and his father hosted 4 meetings between Guzman Lora and the Carrillo Fuentes brothers to try to resolve their differences and bloodshed.
Oh, hey Jay, can you point out our rats? There you go.
hey, okay, here I'll point them out for you.
Yeah.
Anyone that's mentioned on this video is right.
Everyone mentioned in that video is a rat. All right.
Anyone and everyone, including the ones that are dead. Oh, before I move on, this says Eddie Gonzalez says, "Soul J, are you saying in Mexico is just Ratline? I'm just saying in the cartel is Ratline. I'm sure that anyone outside the cartel who are now bosses, there's probably a bunch of stand up real dudes that probably never get involved with this type of criminal activity to have to worry about being rats. But yeah, I'm not saying it. I'm letting you hear it. It's actually a rat, what you call a rat on the stand, talking about a bunch of other rats. So you tell me.
Rodolfo kept killing my friend's people or throwing them into the government. Mr. Rios, Jesus Rio Felix, the accused's operator,
We're looking at Vicentillo's day one of testimony told by a processor reporter using AI, and this is like accounts of his observations during the Chapo trials.
was arrested by the army at Nabalato's offices. They told us that the Carrillo Fuentes had turned him in. The witness indicated that in order to find an urgent solution, another meeting was held with the Carrillo Fuentes. The May, the Blues, and Chapo were also present as mediators. Rodolfo wanted to plead and let his boss, who was my namesake, Vicente, speak. He spoke very badly about my friend Chapo and his people. The Blues left the meeting. Chapo wanted to kill Rodolfo. Given the failure of that meeting, Chapo, with the support of the Blues, asked the May for authorization to eliminate Rodolfo. Vicentillo said, "I'm with you." My dad told him, "Comrade Chapo, go ahead. We have to kill Rodolfo."
So, but here you just heard saying that Vicente said that Chapo was, Azul's organization, which Azul didn't have a plaza, but he had respect. So there's a lot of different, like a lot of times you hear about these people like Mayo Chapo, Dariano Felix, Mencho, like these are all people who have a bunch of, people and plazas. And Azul had a organization, but it wasn't as people may think, like plaza people. You get me? His organization was just his own, but he didn't care to be in a specific city, a specific area, but he trafficked massive amounts of drugs, and he had a lot of respect, and he was considered to be someone who always opted for friendships other than violence, but they respected him, and he had a lot of connection with the government. And it states that Vicente says that him and Chapo were together on how they felt Vicente Carrillo, which was the Juarez cartel, and Rodolfo disrespected their organization, and they wanted to take Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes out, which was the younger Carrillo Fuentes, and they asked for permission to El Mayo. Okay, now uh, to everyone around the world or all these experts, they would say, well, the fact that he's asking for permission is like it shows who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. But it's not like that. It's just a form of respect, like saying, look, oh, this is a decision we want to make, but we can't make it unless you're in agreement with it because it's going to affect everyone. And that's how they function. It's no, it's not like a top to bottom type of tier of leaders. It's more of a linear kind of a linear, well, graph. What do you call it, Shy? Like, a linear type of leadership.
To Joaquin Guzman's stay in Puente Grande, the prosecutor questioned the witness about whether he knew that the accused communicated with his subordinates from his cell. Yes, he gave instructions to El Pollo by phone, and while he was in Puente Grande, El Chapo lacked nothing. Damas or Lopez and another guard were in charge of that. The capo had a hard time in the Amaloya de Juarez prison. According to the witness, El Vicentillo maintained that he did not know the details of El Chapo's escape from Puente Grande. He only said that in the mountains everyone celebrated each anniversary of the event. From what he learned in those conversations in the mountains was that only 3 or 4 people knew about the plans. He assured that neither former President Vicente Fox nor the then director of the prison, as mentioned by some media outlets, were involved in.
So right here, one of the big things is that Damason Lopez was the director of the prison of Puente Grande, and where Chapo escaped. Which, like he said, highlighted. I don't believe that he didn't know how he escaped. Vicente saying that, but um, I don't think he cared at the time. But um, as someone who was part of a really he was part of our organization through Chapo, through that Sinaloa cartel. He was one of the actual prison guards that, there's two custodians that actually work with us, work for Sinaloa cartel, but work under us, who were actually custodians of Chapo in that in Puente Grande, right while he escaped and actually helped him escape. One of them was a worker who worked as a on the drug side for us, who was actually one of the workers who would unload and load up our trains, and the other one was a hitman for a hit for a squad, a very big squad, who we talked about, or the girls talked about in the book. It's Poco Pelos, and we call him AKA Rambo. He was actually a custodian. Um, and you know what? They always tell me so many stories, of like different times they actually, had to deal with Chapo, and um, they were terrified. I remember one of the custodians, we would call him Conejo, and he was a pretty boy dude, really good dude too. Uh, he would recount like one of the times that they told him that to take him to the solitary and, like, as a punishment, and he had to tell him like to strip and stuff like that. And he said that he the way he talked, because he talked real like he was real graphic, right? With his way of talking.
Right.
Really good dude, though, pretty boy dude. And he was like, I had to go take him out his cell, and he he said I was shaky. He would act a little bit like, like a queer almost. He said I was shaky, and I said, sir, I have to ask you that you go to the cell. You get me? And he said he was so scared, and he told him to strip, and he was like, and he said, man, Chavo turned around. He said, don't worry about it. Like, don't worry. Like, it's your job. Like, I know what I got to do. Uh, stuff like that. So yeah, so I remember they both recounted at the time, they actually got to see Chapo, and in the meeting when they were actually there with the person that represented them and Damason and stuff. they got to see him once he was free, and he said that they were shaking in their pants, bro. You could imagine, you know, like they work for him now, but it's like they thought that Chapo was gonna like look at them and just remember of some of the BS they went through and just get rid of them, and that wasn't the case. So yeah, it's just crazy how later on we're gonna be interacting with so many people that were involved in all these big situations that became history. So and especially later with me because I get to hear like every part of it, and once I was in prison, hearing intimate stories coming from Javier Adriano Felix, that he would recount, that I'll be like, holy shit, strangers, I
There's a
mean,
book in that.
yeah, life is stranger than fiction, what they say, right? And that's true. So
Stranger than fiction. Hit the like button if you have yet to do so.
yeah, I'll be honest with you. This is like all exclusive content, guys, that you're gonna get nowhere else. I don't think I'm ever gonna have the time to break something down like this. So
After his successful escape, Vicentillo stated that he met up with Chapo again at a ranch on the outskirts of Mexico City, owned by his friend Barbarino. There, El Mayo offered his friend all the support he needed to get the drug business going again. El Mayo also informed Guzman Lora that the government was carrying out operations in Puebla and Tepic to catch him, but he reassured him by telling him that he had police and military commanders in his pocket who would keep him informed. El Mayo sent his pilot, Patricio Solano, to return Chapo to Culiacan in a helicopter without a rotor on the back. That helicopter was the one that Jorge Milton Cifuentes Villa allegedly gave Chapo. Who's the blue one? The prosecutor asked. My father's friend since the 70s and 80s and Chapo's friend. Who exactly did Chapo?
so you see how some of the details, like without the rotor in the back, why there's certain like specific details are like important is because when you're recounting stories and all you can remember a certain fact, that's a highlight because the prosecutor is like connecting the dots. You get me? Um, so it turns out that this Colombian big drug lord gave that helicopter as a gift to Chapo. You get me? So like later on, like Vicente might not, who cares about that, but later on, that prosecution is going to make that connection, and it's important because when grand jury and you're in a courtroom setting and you're trying to paint a picture, you want to see that a little fact like that, somewhere to Vicente doesn't know all the information. Like he doesn't know Chapo's day to day. You get me? He doesn't care about,
Right. A
but
little
things that
fact will line up with something else.
yeah, it's gonna line up with the fact that that other cooperator from Colombia. So I know someone just asked me about are all Mexican rats or whatever. No, there's other Colombian rat. It just seems like anyone who's in criminal activity, you got like a 90% chance that you're going to be a rat if you're involved in criminal activity. And you won't know until you actually get handcuffs on you, and you have to look through the process. So you might be that 10%. You might be that 10%, but we have to see. But he's just highlighting now again. You know him. Seeing this picture of him in a stand. Like at the end of the day, he's an important person. Like we might think of Chapo as Chapo, like the way we see him, but to him, he's like, who gives a fuck? What he was wearing and how he got to A, to point A to point B. You get me?
Right.
Like they were the bosses while Chapo was sitting in prison for 7.5 years. You know what I'm saying?
Sent to kill Rodolfo. The black guy, an ex-military man who was his bodyguard.
How did he find out about this? I
Heard from him and my dad. Vicentillo recalled that on September 11, 2004, he was in Culiacan when he heard on the radio that El Bravo, another nickname for El Negro, had located Rodolfo in a shopping mall along with his wife and his bodyguards. When Rodolfo left the movie theater in the shopping mall in Abelardo, they killed him. His wife and the judicial police officers who were guarding him also died. Pedro Perez, commander of the Sinaloa.
So that was a really famous shootout in one of the malls in Culiacan where, like, even when I was there, there's still bullet holes on the walls and stuff like that. And Rodolfo was such a like he had a lot of juice there that he had waiters, on the payroll and people that worked at the movie theater because they said when they started, when they sent the operation to get rid of him, they didn't think it was gonna be an easy operation, but they figured, okay, we got him, unprotected. I think he had like 6, 8 bodyguards with him, And when they attacked, he said that they had shooters coming out of everywhere, that they had to actually call for backup.
Hmm.
And there's a bunch of, of their really big important cells that got involved in carrying out that hit. And it lasted for, like, I want to tell you, at least, an hour or so, and longer than an hour or something like that.
Judicial police, was wounded in the leg. Vicentillo pointed it out. He said that he was the one who, with bribes, calmed the judicial police down because of the collateral damage caused by Rodolfo's execution. Who is the ghost? An ex-military man. What happened to El Pollo? They killed him while he was a prisoner in Toluca, in the Altiplano prison. He was murdered inside the prison on December 31, 2004. My dad told me, and his government contact told him. An hour before he was murdered, I spoke to him. I was the last person he spoke to. Vicentillo said that from 2001 to 2009 he was in charge of all of El Mayo's business. My uncle Ray received the pipes at some warehouses he had in Mexico City, and from
So just to make it clear, look what he said. From 2001 to 2009, he was in charge of all of his business. You get me? And like I said before, like, uh, AKA, he's the boss. You get me?
there, using other pipes, he sent the cocaine to Culiacan. But
They're talking about pipes, they're talking about gas pipes, fuel pipes. That's what they call them.
his father El Chapo's Colombian partners, the witness named Chupeta, also his compadre. He said the 33rd, I baptized one of his sons, one of his 33
Chupeta was a Colombian lord. He was one of the bosses for the Norte de Valle cartel, which was considered to be called the super cartel. He was actually a big witness. He's famous because his plastic surgery. He went from being a pretty boy drug lord, and he got all this plastic surgery that went wrong. So they call him like the mask, I believe.
That boy face fucked up.
So he's famous for that, but he's also famous for being gay. Um, he's also, he has a bunch of kids. He had a bunch of, like, gorgeous women and stuff like that. But he's also gay.
Was he openly flamboyant and shit?
Yeah, he was a boss. One of the big bosses. I think even at this trial, he testified that I think he sent to kill 3,000 people or something like that.
Damn.
Um, really wealthy. He was actually in prison with my brother. My brother actually did quite some time with him. Uh, and yeah, again, he's not Mexican, but again, he's a cooperator for.
Don't say it ain't so. Wait, there's other kind of cooperators.
Yeah,
Oh
you
man,
know,
one in every
who
two criminals is a cooperator. Enough with the fucking questions.
yeah, whoever was that person who asked it.
Zoraida has a good question. Gas pipes like Pemex gas pipes or just rug lingo?
No, like what we call them pipas. We're calling, like, fuel tankers. They could be. You won't put Bamex on them. We'll put whatever
All
whatever it
right, but
was.
yeah, they got dope in them though. Okay, bet.
But
That's
those are really good pipes. Like, none of them. I never seen one of those pipes being busted in the U.S.
mhm.
So I know they exist, but in Mexico, for this organization, especially for Sinaloa, like, that was one of the main ways you could transport
Right.
big quantities of drugs. Um,
So you never know. You might be looking at a freighter full of the Perikin King Kings. You go ahead. Buddy's face is crazy. Get that motherfucker off the screen already. What are we doing?
well, no, that's what they say he was a pretty boy ass
That's the
dude too.
reality right there.
AKA, I'm gonna tell you something. One of the stories is that he was already wanted and stuff, but El de los Sapos, that telenovela that Andres Lopez, who was a good friend of mine, who
Hmm.
actually he did, and I'm gonna tell you, like, the de los Sapos, like, that, no, that telenovela is what brought, like, this world into mainstream. Like, that basically solidified these type of stories into to what soap operas used to be, right?
Mm.
And he was a big factor in that story. But from my understanding, there's other ways. But one of the persons that actually cooperated against him was his gay boyfriend, who got jealous. That he found out he had like his personal trainer, like, and he was actually seeing him, and he found out he was seeing his personal trainer in Brazil, and that personal trainer ended up calling the feds on him.
Why would you want to be in the game? Everything is too fragile. It's not even about money. It's not about life. It's not about revenge. It's about petty shit like somebody did this or somebody cheated on me or somebody. Why the be in the game when everything is just one straw away from falling apart? It's a Taj Mahal made of matchsticks, man. You pull one of the motherfuckers out and it's a wrap. There's no cushion for a man's ego. Listen, human beings have been destroying empires over egos for 1,000,000 years. That's just it.
Yeah, and you know what? And I always say, like, I don't think me and my brother ever had ego like that. That's what kept us, like, you know, surviving and stuff, even to this day. Like, but 100%, I've seen it firsthand, even from the most humble people. It's the destruction of mankind. I will say, you know, egos, and it's a shame. And this big drug lord that killed 3,000 people, he killed 300 people himself, from my understanding, who probably was worth, you know, billions of dollars. From my understanding,
So it's safe to say that Buddy was more than just a rug dealer. He was a sociopath.
this dude right here. Here's the thing. I think we talked about this. Like, I don't know if you're a sociopath. I'm not sure if the power
Definition.
makes you become a sociopath. You know, but
Power?
yeah, but
Well, what's the
right,
saying? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
absolutely. And guess what? He ended up being a man of God later, and you know, whatever the case is, I don't ever think just because you're a drug lord it makes you evil. I just think that some of the decisions you have to make are evilish. But he controlled the north of the Valle cartel. Look it up if you guys don't know about it. I think he, you know, from his estimation, he was importing, or he imported. I don't know. I think they said I don't want to just take anything away from him, but I think it was like I think they said like 600,000 kilos or something like that. You know, into the United States.
There's a
So
movie. There's a movie in that face.
so just let's explain to you, just so you know, he was Chapo's plug, okay?
There it
So
is.
just you know, one of Chapo's plug, just to give you a little like rough, you know, like a good view of who he was. And if you guys want to hear the story, if you guys haven't seen it, the telenovela called Cartel Los Sapos, written and told by Andres Lopez Lopez, um, shows him, and he's a big part of that novella and stuff like that. And from my understanding, he's actually free already. So um, he, you know, got extradited from Brazil. Um, I think he received 25 years, and he walked that down. He didn't get the time
He
he
did his
wanted.
time in Brazil.
No, he got caught in Brazil, and then the guy extradited to Brooklyn. And I know that he got more time than he thought he should have got.
How long did he get? Because here's my thing, bro. They don't give a shit about 300 people that he offed himself. If they willing to make a deal with dude like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's.
You know what, I know he received 25, but he got ruled 35. So he got his time deducted, all that
Yeah,
for
he
testimony
talked.
and all that, and cooperating. So we have to look that up. I know he was released in the last couple years. You know what I mean?
It's just a hypocrisy from the government that
But he didn't receive the 25 years. He didn't do the 25 years.
the fact that a dude like that see the light of day is crazy.
Children, he clarified. He also mentioned Jorge Milton's brothers and Fuentes Villa. He recalled that he worked with his father, with El Chapo, and before with Roba Chava. Do you know who ordered the killing of Roba? My father and Vicente Carrillo Fuentes. How do you know that? My father told me on the phone that he was going to order the killing of Robivas. In another twist in the chronology, Liscamp
The person they're talking about is Robert Chivas. Again, another associate of Sinaloa Cartel, another associate of El Mayo and Chapo and everyone, and Dolores guys. And again, you hear these, you know, coming from him, that it's the own people, your own friends, the own people in your organization that are sending out to, you know, commit hits and murders around against these people. You're hearing it like firsthand. Do you hear me? This is firsthand testimony. And Robert Chivas was a very, you know, important trafficker in the Sinaloa cartel for many years, and you guys could look him up and see different stories about him. So
asked Vicentillo to talk about a negotiation that took place in mid-2008 in Mexico City. The son of the mayor stated that he was sought out by one of the contacts, Capi Beto. Heriberto Sassueta Godoy. I was taken by a lawyer who had a Pemex ship and who was in contact and in agreement with high-level politicians. They did not want to reveal the names of these contacts to me. They wanted an appointment to see my father. They wanted to invest in a shipment. I made the appointment. The meeting took place in a safe house and several Pemex officials were there, who showed the Capros photographs of the ships with which they intended to
So just you guys let you know, Pemex is the official, like it's the oil gasoline company of Mexico. It's controlled by the government. It's owned by the government. And it's basically like there's no other gas station other than Pemex. You get me? And they control the petroleum, the oil in Mexico, the drilling, the making of gasoline. They control it all, and that's one of the main businesses of how government officials and ex presidents actually make their money is through these companies. And for him to state that he actually had a meeting where Pemex officials wanted to invest in a shipment of drugs, okay, and they basically traffic in the black gold, right, of the world, and they want to get him involved in the white gold, that was more lucrative to them. So
transport the drugs from South America to Mexico. The transfer was going to be a success, they told my father and compadre Chapo. Was the cocaine transported on Pemex ships? The prosecutor wanted to know. I don't know because months later I was arrested. At that time I still hadn't done the operation. Quote. The prosecutor showed Vicentillo a photograph of Alexander Cifuentes Villa in a military uniform, armed, and next to the defendant, who was
so again, all these people are cooperators, including the first picture of the Cifuentes brother, who's in charge of the paramilitary group in Colombia. He was a cooperator, right? And then you have the younger Cifuentes. I think his name is Alex. And again, he was a close associate, compadre Chapo, another cooperator. And he was actually one of the individuals that was actually caught up in that one phone call, or the second phone call, with my brother, and that recording that me and my brother made against Chapo. So it's just crazy how it kind of all tied in. You know what I mean?
dressed the same and carrying large caliber weapons. Vicentillo identified the Colombian drug trafficker, noting that he acted as Guzman's secretary. He nicknamed Alexander in Caparo and his responsibility was to coordinate the meetings that were held in the mountains. At that moment, the judge asked the prosecutor not to be repetitive. The lawyer stated that she would take it into account. Did you ever interact with the defendant's sons? Yes, Ivan and Alfredo are the ones I interacted with the most. They were very good friends of my brother's. Contrary to what the judge had asked, the prosecutor asked Vicentillo to describe the tricks used to smuggle drugs into the United States. Vicentillo repeated much of what other witnesses had already mentioned, but added a method. The cartel workers buy up to 15 private cars every day to hide shipments of drugs, 25 and 30 kilograms. Some of these cars cross the border legally up to 4 times a day. Mr. Zambada.
Like just say one of the things I hear is that I hear people point out all the time with the border and cross, and what's happening now with the administration is that, and I want to highlight, is that most of the people that actually cross that border with drugs are American citizens. So I know that we always like, okay, well, Mexican drug cartels are terrorist organizations, but like 80, 70, 80% of those people that cross the borders, with drugs and and participate in these activities are American citizens. So it's something to point out, that something no one ever talks about.
So these are American citizens recruited on this side and just doing business.
That word recruitment means like someone who doesn't want to do it. I never met someone who was involved in drug trafficking that didn't want to do it. Matter of fact, me and my brother turned down a bunch of people who were out thirsty, looking for money, looking, just trying to get into business. So I no one I never met someone that was forced to be in the business, or
I
forced to
rephrase that. Even though recruit shit after 9/11, a whole lot of people ran to that recruitment offenses. They wanted to do what they wanted to do. But I rephrase that. Just people that's just doing business, giving a job, doing business. Americans on this side of the border
Yeah.
that their
Yeah,
job is to go
absolutely.
across. We just heard a story. We just covered a story recently about a Utah couple with Pemex, like you said. They switched the black gold. He had stolen tankers and shit. Switched the black gold for the white gold. But these are Americans on this side that are hired for the job, huh?
Yeah, hired. I just want to tell you again, they're begging for the job.
Mm.
This is from again my knowledge, from my experience, right? What I've seen.
In 2008, Abelino was in charge of building the tunnels on the US border for my friend Chapo. How do you know? My father told me, my friend Chapo told me. I was arrested when Abelino was building a tunnel in Tijuana. Regarding the Flores twins, the witness admitted to having met.
Oh man, you know what? You want to talk about those highlights about the tunnel? I just don't believe that he says that. Oh yeah, one tunnel, man. He knew. Here's the thing. Now I'll take that back. We use those tunnels. You asked me where they were at. I'm gonna tell you what area. I don't fucking know. We didn't care about who knows. And that goes the same for shot for Vicente. He doesn't know that. That's like minute to him. You get me? It's not even a big issue. Like you have people who do that job. No one needs to know where they're at, where they're located. All they need to care is that they're there.
In 2005 during a meeting held in Culiacan at his father's house. He noted that they worked with German Olivares and were major buyers and major distributors of cocaine in Chicago. On one occasion, in 2008, he said, the Flores brothers helped the Sinaloa cartel obtain weapons in the United States to confront the Beltrán Leyva, Vicente Carollo Fuentes and the ADAs, organizations with which they were at war. Who is Cesar Gay?
Y'all was running guns and shit, huh? Was that in the proffer?
You know what? That wasn't proper. It's something we don't like to talk about because we don't want to give the wrong impression. Our position in that organization was more than just a business one. It was more like 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 they confided in us, right?
Part of the team.
Yeah, we helped out in different ways, that we could, and they were trusting us for us to do different things, but you know, some of the other stuff you'll hear more about it as the projects continue to get developed and stuff like that.
Hold on, what?
We got at least something for sale.
Hold on, rewind that a little bit. I want to hear what the fuck they said, what y'all was running guns about, because you ain't gonna tell the story. Let's get the information from the AI guy. Rewind that shit, man. Since you want to be on that bullshit. You see, y'all, I ain't letting him off the hook. What he talking about. Hit the like button.
Major distributors of cocaine in Chicago. On one occasion, in 2008, he said, the Flores brothers helped the Sinaloa cartel obtain weapons in the United States to confront the Beltrán Leyva, Vicente Carollo Fuentes and the ADAs, organizations with which they were at war, using trucks and private cars.
They said for the Sinaloa cartel, but I was fucking helping out both of them. I'm not stupid.
You was the arms dealer that was dealing to both sides?
I guess I was,
And that's the story you're not going to tell us?
Yeah, we'll talk about that some other day.
You motherfucker, keep going. I wish I could put him in the fucking battery. Put him in the fucking battery.
There's another ally of the Sinaloa cartel. Who is Cesar Gastelum? He worked on his own. He coordinated directly with Damas or Lopez. In the same vein, the witness spoke of Leopoldo Chua, whom he identified as the trafficker who brought cocaine and...
This is another good friend. This is someone who I associated with. He was a very large drug trafficker that came from nothing overnight, and he had a good relationship because of a marriage, and he was a big supplier of pseudoephedrine at the time, which was probably the only precursor that could make methamphetamines when it was in the highest demand. And just to give you an example, is that someone like him, he would gift, Chapo Mile 2-3 tons at a time of pseudoephedrine that could be worth anywhere from $15 to $30 million, each. So as a gift, so just wrap your hands and minds around that,
Ephedrine to Cancun, used to make the methamphetamine sold by Chapo's people. Regarding ephedrine, Vicentillo emphasized that Chapo insisted on manufacturing ice. For this reason, Almu suggested importing chemical agents from Belize through a contact, Pedrito. The capos decided to buy 2 tons of ephedrine in Belize, but the substance never arrived because it was stolen on the way by elements of the Federal Preventive Police. At that moment, the judge ordered a recess for lunch, something that the members of the
So just so you know, when these things happen, when they're talking about one specific like drug deal, they're only doing it because there's probably someone else testifying about that specific deal. You get me? So on the other hand, they could have actual federal police that actually stole that, shipment. You get me? So that's the only reason why they highlight specific deals.
jury implored with their eyes. Reporters were able to confirm with the defense that Chapo's wife would not be attending the hearing. Emma had gone to Mexico with her daughters, who had only been able to see him on the day the judge gave them permission. Upon their return, the prosecutor asked, "Did you traffic cocaine in submarines?" Quote, "I received a submarine off the coast of Sinaloa, and in 2008, Juancho told me that he had seized a submarine with 10 tons of cocaine that belonged to my father and my friend Chapo." The prosecutor
So AI, right? I think what he's relating to is that they were, sending large shipments of cocaine from Colombia up to Sinaloa in submergible submarines, right? And there's a 10-ton shipment seized. But again, at that time there was plenty. There's 4, 5, 6, 7 submarines, in the waters at every given time. With anywhere from 4 to 10 to 12 tons of cocaine, and we were all always involved in those shipments. Where we would take a percentage of those shipments as investments. Along with other high-ranking members of Sinaloa cartel.
Robin, you ever meet the Chinese Sinaloa member born in Mexico?
No, I never met a Chinese-born member. Well, I want to say Chinese-born Mexicans are not rare. In Mexico, there's so many, Chinese Mexicans, and it's weird because naturally, I remember I used to see Chinese, and I want to speak to them in English, and they'll be like, "¿Cómo? ¿Qué dice?" And they'll speak to me in Spanish. I'm like, "Oh, like, why am I doing that?" But yeah, no, I never met it. I only mess with the big dogs.
Shout out Moist Fist. He says, so you're telling me that the cartels can make a successful submarine, but billionaires can't figure it out? Facts. That's what's happening.
Facts. Nah, they just give them like these are submersibles. And some of the submarines, I mean, they wouldn't go as deep. All you needed them to be was like,
Break
you
the
know,
water.
yeah. But I mean, even the ones that would break the water that were a little bit deeper, we're talking about like 20, 30 feet maybe. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
100, 200 yards, if anything. You know what I mean?
We probably had this conversation before, but let's say más o menos cuánto le sacaban a un submarine. How much you get out of a submarine? Hit the like button if you have yet to do so.
All right. So look, the one that benefited the most would be the bosses. You get me? And their ultimate, like their biggest come up was that if, like, for instance, that submarine that got caught with the 10 tons, like there was 4 other submarines, right? And then they would go and tell everyone else that was like invested in the submarines, hey, they got caught, and then they keep all the money.
Right.
So it was like if
A
even
circle
when they,
jerk.
yeah, even you thought you lost, they would come up, fucking shit, 4 or 5, come up with like 25 tons, 20 tons. You get me? For free for them. You get me? At that time, the worth each key in Mexico, like landed, was $15,000. So imagine, that shit. We talking about 20 tons. You know, that's a lot of money. You get me?
Right. No, and
And
you
we're talking,
said you got the call on one of those. Like, don't worry, yours is good, but everybody
yeah,
else
we're
has
doing good.
disappeared.
We're talking about $300 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah, but ultimately the bosses made the money, and they weren't stupid either. They were tight. So each of the submarines will vest like 1,000, or at the most 1,500 kilos each. You get me? So their investment was minimum in those. But again, it's not all about the money you have; it's the connection, the respect you have, and those, and how much money you could make.
Rome that guy, yo Jay. Without the Mexicans, why do you think the Colombians can still get weight in the U.S.? What percent to the Mexicans get do the Mexicans get for helping the Colombians?
I mean, technically they can't. So whatever percent they get, it's never gonna go. 50-50 is a high reach. They'll probably like they literally probably do like 70-30, 70% Mexicans, 30% Colombians, or 60-40. It depends on what they're gonna do, but they're never gonna go less than 50, meaning 50-50. But Mexican drugs cartels are gonna control that part of it unless Colombians use Puerto Rican organization, more Caribbean, the DRs, and or they ship it on their own through ports of the U.S. Yeah, Vancouver was one of our distribution points in Canada.
Asked Vicentillo to explain to the jury how
Oh shit!
shipments were handled by submarine. Staring intently at Chapo, she stated that the suppliers were given the coordinates of where the semi-submersible should arrive. At that point, 7 or 10 speedboats were waiting for it. How are the profits from drug sales collected and where is the money sent from the United States? It is returned to Culiacan in the same way that drugs are sent, in the same transports. After Culiacan, the Colombians' share is sent to Mexico City so that it reaches them through exchange offices or by plane. Who does the Sinaloa cartel pay bribes to? The municipal police, the state police, various political friends, the military, the PFP, and the PGR.
AKA everyone.
At what level of the police force were the bribes made? State and municipal police commanders and their directors.
Who do they call the Yankee?
The commander of the PGR. The bigwigs. The soldiers.
How much money did they pay in bribes?
The entire state police force, between $30,000 and $50,000 a month. A Yankee, $50,000 or more. Did they also pay bonuses? Yes. My father would send gifts when the shipments went well. Corruption payments were made in other parts of the country. By the bosses of the plazas. At the federal government level. Carlos had contacts with the military. My father had his contacts with the military, PFP and CIEDO. And Chapo Guzman with the military. In mid-2007, he paid a colonel in the 9th Military Zone for information on operations against the cartel. Damaso, the lawyer paid to get information on the Carrillo Fuentes, the ETA and other enemies of the organization, who were paid in Sinaloa. The police commanders in Sinaloa take care of you. My father was a very good friend of Jesus Antonio Iniguez. He was in charge of all the police in Sinaloa. How much did the monthly payment for corruption amount to in total? It was over $1 million. Liscam wanted the witness to go into more detail.
So right there, I think for the state of Sinaloa, it was like $1 million, but then like from Mexico City to like the border, it was like around $2.5 million, and for the most part, like when high ranking official, we didn't know, like we didn't know who that went to, but for all the lower state corruptions, you know, people who were like important in the organization, we all chipped in, 50, $100,000 a month. And honestly, when I did the math, I was like, shit, they used to profit $1 million, $2 million off of that. You get me? Because we all chipped in to pay for government protection. So just think about it. You have 20, 25 people like me and my brother's organization all chipping in 50 or $100,000 or more. It's almost like they're making money off of this shit. Again, if a problem, something happened where it was a confiscation, arrest, or something like that, then or a stolen shipment, then obviously you'd have to pay a little bit more. So, but it kind of worked out. No one would complain.
To give names of Mexican military personnel on the cartel payroll. I took General Antimo to Culiacan to meet my father. He was a major general officer in the Defense Secretariat. There were more. General Antimo told my dad that Arturo Beltrán Leyva, the Zetas, and the Carrillos Fuentes were looking for other generals to ask them to attack my dad, my buddy Chapo. They wanted to send money to the generals so they would arrest us. They talked for about 5 hours. My dad told him he would give him a monthly allowance. At that moment he gave him $50,000 and made it clear that he would receive $50,000 a month. But Vicentillo knew much more. The prosecutor was anxious.
Remember, this is AI, and this is the reporter basically explaining his thoughts. You get me? Sharing his thoughts of what he was seeing. So, like, he's explaining that Vicentillo is getting anxious, but I would love to actually get the transcripts of word for word of everything that was said. You get me?
Colonel Adams. He was a friend of my dad. In 2001, he was in charge of President Fox's security. We met with him on several occasions in Mexico City. He passed information to my dad about operations that were going to be carried out to locate my buddy Chapo. I met with him at the El Lago restaurant in Chapultepec. The prosecutor wanted to know if Colonel Adams was known by any nickname. When we talked about him, we called him Chicle, because in Mexico there was a brand of Adams gum. Vicentillo implicated the military man in the rescue of Chapo in Tepic. The few reporters who attended the hearing looked at each other in surprise. The expectations we had about the testimony of the son of Mayo were more than met. The witness was pointing directly to General Humberto Eduardo Antimo Miranda and Colonel Marco Antonio de Leon Adams, chief of the Presidential General Staff, in charge of former President Fox's personal security. Do you know who the people who make up the line are? The interrogation continued. They are people from the Carrillo Fuentes. At some point they split up and decided to support the M10. Were there ever attempts to negotiate peace with the Juarez cartel? 2 meetings were held in Zacatecas. JL, people from the ZAS, Jaguar, and VICENTE Zambadas attended. They reached an agreement or a truce, but it didn't last. Why did the people cross the line with the Sinaloa cartel? They deserted the Juarez cartel when they found out that Vicente and Locedas were going after Mayo, Zambada and Chapo. They respected my dad and my friend Chapo. Unfortunately, Arturo was with Locedas and Vicente. What happened at the second meeting in Zacatecas? My dad attended as an intermediary, along with JL, Miguel Trevino Morales, Z40.
So JL is, I want to tell you his name is Jesus Ledesma, and he was one of the like major lieutenants or like the second in command of the Juarez cartel for Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, and he was like Mayo to really dislike them. And I remember that he lived right in the like neighborhood where Arturo Beltrán's family lived, and when Chapo and everyone was still in the organization, they used to have someone like round the clock surveillance on his mom's house, waiting to see if he would ever come and visit his mom. And they used to be like, he comes visit his mom, we just keep missing him. So I remember they had a car parked there just waiting for him to show up. And the house was a modest house, but this dude JL was like, he would travel from Juarez to Sinaloa and other parts of the country, but he was like a big target for the Sinaloa cartel. And Miguel Torino Morales was, the Zetas and the two brothers of the Zeta cartel.
Arturo Beltrán Leyva, and Vicente Carrillo Fuentes. Nothing could be done either, and the problems increased. After that meeting, my dad.
Something just to point out is like, it's crazy how these people, are at war, killing each other, decapitating, doing all kinds of, inhumane stuff against each other, but yet they'll sit down and have meetings, you know, and talk things through, which is, even to me was even surprising. You get me that you have the bosses, show up and just literally have conversations about their next moves and see if they could actually negotiate. And there's literally thousands of lives being lost, at the same time.
Sitting at the table over blood feuds.
Mm-hmm.
Dad and Chapo talked about what they would do in Culiacan. We had already located several of the Beltrán Leyva safe houses. What happened in early 2008? In January, Alfredo Beltrán Leyva was arrested in Culiacan. That made things worse. Arturo accused my friend Chapo and my dad of having turned Alfredo over to the government. The clock struck 4:30 p.m. and the judge concluded the meticulous hearing. Prosecutor Listman was left with several questions in her head. Friday, January 4, 2019. Surprisingly, the hearing that day was still uneventful, and once again there were more people than media representatives. El Chapo was wearing a blue suit, beige shirt, and sky blue tie. When Vicentillo entered the courtroom, the capo nodded slightly, possibly to greet his partner's son. The junior Zambada smiled at him. When did the war against the Beltrán Leyvas begin? Liscam asked as soon as Judge Kogan gave the go-ahead. I'll never forget it. April 30, 2008, that day is Children's Day in Mexico. What happened? We Gave the PFP and the military the address of Arturo's safe houses in Culiacan. Information about his cars, everything. There were
You guys hear that? I mean, just imagine that he's testifying that they gave all the information to the government about all Arturo Beltrán Leyva's safe houses, families, the cars that they drove, and all that. And it's just, again, I'm just a rat. It's just me. I'll take that. But you're getting kind of firsthand experience of something that me and my brother already knew, but you're hearing it like coming from who I consider to be like the third in command of the biggest drug cartel in the world. Who, this person who actually sent people to, get kidnapped, murdered, tortured, and all kinds of things. And these are the people that everyone idolizes. But again, right? I'm the soft one, right? So yeah, I think this just kind of highlights everything. Just from a couple of these statements that he's gonna make.
searches, confrontations with the Icarios, and arrests. That's how the war began. Who were Chapo Guzman's hitmen? Manuel Torres, M1, Gonzalo Insulza, El Macho
Right here, I think they made a mistake because these are all Mayo Zambada's hitmen.
Prieto, Chino Antrax, Jose Rodrigo Aresh Gamboa. Who was in charge of the defendant's security? El Negro, Fantasma, Damaso, and Cholo Ivan. Where were they when the war began? I was in Culiacan, my father and Chapo were in the mountains. How many hitmen worked for the Sinaloa cartel? Between 25 and 30 people for each of the bosses.
All right, Shy. This is one of the things that I've been trying to explain to everyone, right? That people always think that the cartel like this huge organization line. Like most of the people you see are all like work for people under, you know, at different fractions of the organization. But he says to himself like each boss had 20, 25 people, and that's what makes up the structure. You get me? All of those 25 people have more associates, more underlings, and so on. You get me? But truthfully, the people who are directly associated with the hierarchy of the drug cartels are very few, and he states it here. So
As evidence, the prosecutor presented the jury with a photograph of Chapo Guzman with Cholo Ivan when they were arrested in Los Mochis. Vicentillo said that after the war against the Beltrán Leyvas began, he only stayed in Culiacan for about 2 months. I was a priority target for the Beltrans. They wanted to kill me. In fact, a major from the Sedena informed him that the Beltrán Leyvas had the details of the car in which his wife was traveling. The Beltrans ordered their subpoenas to kill my wife and then send me her head. Vicente Zambada Niebla's family moved to Mazatlan. There were many deaths, many attacks against the PFP. The government was on our side. Questioned by the prosecutor about the weapons used in the war, Vicente mentioned all the automatic and semi-automatic rifles that came to mind. M16, R15, AK-47, 50 caliber. El Hijo del Mayo emphasized that all those rifles were purchased in the United States. It caught my attention that my American colleagues like Alan Fair of the New York Times were unfazed by the statements of the witnesses who demonstrated the role of the United States in the drug war.
you see, I like this part where he's highlighting, saying, "Hey, he just gave crazy information about where all the weapons come from and all that, and no one cared." You get me? Because the emphasis was on Mexican drug cartels. No one cared about what the U.S. side of it of the responsibility, like what they have. It just they care about what Mexican drug cartels are doing. You get me?
Wars. Their addicts, their weapons, their money laundering and their corrupt agencies and policies were the beginning, the end and the reason for the whole problem. You'll never see that report in the US press. Brooks told me at the end of one of the previous hearings in which, as in this one, the narco-corruption of the US government was notorious. You and I should write that, the correspondent of the day emphasized. On average, how many weapons did they receive per month? The prosecutor asked. More than 100 weapons on average. Did you ever see the defendant armed? Yes, whenever you saw him he was armed with his pistol on his belt and his R15 or M16 rifle or El Horno. What kind of pistol was he carrying on his waist? A fancy .38 caliber pistol with diamonds on the grips and the figure of an animal, a panther or a jaguar. Prosecutor Liscam showed the jury a photograph in which Chapo is seen with a woman wearing a red blouse. On the capo's waist he carries the pistol with gold grips that has a jaguar made of diamonds. Do you recognize anyone in this photograph? My friend Chapo. Did you ever observe that the defendant had bazookas? At the end of 2007 we went to visit my friend Chapo at Las Coloradas. My dad, my uncle, El Azul, Juancho and I on the track. When we were about to return, one of my friend's bodyguards was carrying a bazooka. What happened next? El Azul asked to see how it was used, the bazooka. El Chapo ordered him to activate it, but the boy fired very low and the bazooka boomed right near us, said Vicentillo, who couldn't help but laugh as he recounted the incident. The witness clarified.
I was actually a witness to one of these simulations where they'll test this shit out, and it was no joke, bro. You know?
You never
That
blew
most of the rifles-
a bazooka?
Hell no, I didn't, but I was
Come on,
there.
man. If that shit's right there, you gotta take the shot. What the fuck?
Shit. You know, bro, I was always like, damn, I'm gonna tell you something. I would try to act like that. I was at that tough shit where I'd be like, what if it's a dud? What if it's
I'm shooting that shit. If I'm right there, I'm shooting it.
You know what? Again, I'm not Eddie Gonzalez. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You fucked up. You're not
I
shot
don't
ill
have
either. I would have shot that shit. Fuck it, it's right there. I gotta do this.
I don't have those type of ball. I used to be like scared as shit though. I'll tell you that much.
They imported from the United States.
Later on, one day I'm gonna tell you a story about one of my guys who was living out there with me. You know, he was a hiring member of the GD's, really good friend of mine, man, to this day, man. And I remember we were at a stash house and I had him with me, and one of the guys, like they all came in, and the dude's like, you know, he's talking, hey man, whatever, and we're sitting at the table. We had just finished eating breakfast, and he's talking, and while he's taking off his coat, it was a little chilly. He has a utility vest on, but in his jacket, he's bringing out, you know, he has a gun on him, you know. Then he brings out, you know, magazines, and he's laying them on the table. And then all of a sudden he brings out, he has 2 grenades. And he puts them on the table. My boy like, hey man, are those real? He said, are those real? He's stuttering, and he's like, you know, he's asking me, and then dude looks at me, and I look at him. I say, oh, he's asking if they're real, and he's like, yeah, here, you want to see? My boy was shitting on himself. He said, get me the fuck out of here, bro.
Crazy.
It was like, you know, just like the norm, you get me?
States were semi-automatic, but that the Sinaloa cartel had a person, Jose Pepe the gunsmith, who made them automatic.
You know, at that time, I remember too, it's just like, you know how they had the magazines, now they have them out of, like, they make them out of plastic and stuff like that, the drums. And before they, you know, all they had gunsmiths that would make bullets, the drums, the 100-round drums. I even seen 200-round drums. And they would make the automatic. They, you know, before the switches and all that, before they were like plastic and stuff, they had gunsmiths that actually would do these things, you know.
What did you call automatic rifles? In Culiacan, we called them bursts. Did you ever see Guzman Lore fire an automatic rifle? I saw my friend shoot his burst rifle 2 or 3 times. Who's the alligator? A hitman for the Beltrán Leyva brothers who was murdered in 2008. I gave the order to the M1, Macho Prieto, and Chino Antrax to go and pick up the alligator. I asked them to grab him alive.
What happened next? They
kept him in a safe house for a day. Hencho interviewed him. They were torturing him to get the information. The hitmen kept Chapo informed of the information they were extracting from the alligator. What did they do with the alligator? After a few days, they killed him. Juancho gave the order. Juancho and my dad told me, did you kill anyone? No. I gave the orders several times. I don't know how many. I was their boss, the hitman, but whenever someone was going to be executed.
Oh my God. So you're saying that the boss never killed anyone? He just sent a bunch of dummies to go kill for him? Because he was the boss? Oh my God. I didn't know that they had that type of power. I didn't know they had to act like, you know, soldiers to be bosses and to carry out hits. But what the fuck would I know?
Jay, do you know about Cesar Gastelum Serrano Oakland said he was the richest?
Didn't Vicente just talked about him right now? I don't know him like that. No.
Chapo's authorization was requested. Did he have any extramarital affairs? Yes, once he
Damn, Vicente's telling on Chapo's side chicks? What the fuck? I thought I was the only snitch.
Chapo got
used
hoes.
fake IDs. He always traveled with a fake ID. Who was Julio Beltran? A guy that my dad and my buddy
All right, so this Julio Beltran, bro, he was a man. Just to let you know, I don't know the story like that. From my understanding, it was Vicente who gave the order without even talking to his dad to kill him.
Chapo agreed to kill because Julio had made a bad reference to my dad. He said, "Those damn old guys are finished."
That's all he said. He was one of the top earners, top fucking customers. You get me? Good friends. All he said was, "Them old dudes are finished." I could imagine what he said, like, "Nah, them old dudes are done with." And because he said that, because someone who heard him say that went and snitched, who knows if it was even true, they killed him and all his dudes.
We are the new generation. They killed him in 2007. Quote, who ordered the killing of Tico Lindero?
All right, this guy right here, his name is Teco, El Teco Lindero. Teco, if you guys recall in Cartel Wives in the book, I'm not sure, I don't even remember if we mentioned it in the podcast, but he was the brother-in-law of one of my really, really good friends, man, who was Cuate. He was Cuate for real because, you know, in Spanish, Shai, Cuates are fraternal and gemelos are identical, you know, meaning we were both came from one bag, fraternals come from two bags. He had a sister. Cuate had a sister, and his sister was married to El Teco. And Teco was a very important figure in the Señor cartel. And from my understanding, his sister was a baby mama of the Lord of the Skies. Maybe I'm wrong. But there's this song called Cien por Uno from the Tucanes of Tijuana. Shai? I wish we could play it too. It's Cien por Uno, meaning 100 of you for one of mine. And it goes by that, you know, he was kidnapped by the Colombians, and the Lord of the Skies stepped in because he was the Lord of the Skies people at the time, and said, you know what? You basically, you know, the moral story is like, for everyone in one of mine that you kill, I'm gonna kill 100 of yours.
Yeah, it ain't an eye for an eye. It's 100 for one.
And basically, the Lord of the Skies basically was the one that took over the business from Mexicans, you know, and took over the Colombian cartel business. You get me? Where he set the rules where Colombians couldn't work in Mexico on their own, and it's like they have a green light if they do so. They have to be sponsored by someone or, you know, work with somebody. They can't be in Mexico functioning on their own. So these are people like you probably never heard of, but you know we're very important people. And Cuate, man, he was what I consider to be, you know, someone you look like as Scarface. Like, you know, he fit the profile. He will always be getting coked out. Really good dude though, and he was a straight killer though, bro.
Here's the thing: is he smoking old ladies or is he smoking motherfuckers in the business? That's the
Now
difference.
he was smoking dudes in the business
That's
and
it.
popos. You get me? He was the only one that knew where I lived. I remember he showed up at my house one day, like at 3, 4 in the morning, and it was weird because I didn't know, but my phone was ringing. He was until he started like ringing the doorbell, and we live in a gated community. I was like, "What the fuck?" I jumped up, like, "What the fuck?" And I remember seeing the phone, and he's like, "Man, I'm sorry for bothering you." I'll never forget. He said, "Man, I just killed me 3 cops."
God damn.
I gave him the code, and they didn't listen. And he said, and they were called, you know, for backup. He said, and he was just like one of those like extremely paranoid dudes. And he was little, bro, 5'4", 5'5". He could have been one of those horse jockeys.
He was on powder?
Bro, all the time.
That's what it is right there. Like you said, Scarface, he's paranoid all day.
No,
Listen,
and
I know
tell
dudes
you-
that ain't had that much beef and was in the fucking blinds on some brocane.
And when I tell you, his house, bro, when you walked in, his office looked like you were seeing a Tony Montana office.
Right.
And he was, this is weird, like lineage, right, or family, but he was first cousins with Noel El Flaco, and you heard me talk about him a lot. Who was another really good friend of Noel Salguero, who was the boss and creator of Los Matacetas, and later on became la gente nueva, from Juarez. So yeah, just crazy part. But at the end, once they killed El Teco, what they did was there was different people who were part of the organization that knew that were close to like people in Chapo Mayo's organization, and what they did was that they basically said that Noel El Flaco, which was at that time really important in the Sinaloa cartel, and El Teco, and El Cuate, which was my friend, were gonna avenge his brother-in-law's death. They started saying that in order so they wouldn't pay a large debt, and my own Chapo ordered his the murder of him and all his people. And in total, I want to tell you like 11 people were picked up and tortured and killed. The only one that didn't get picked up and tortured and killed was Noel, which then later on I'm gonna arrange and fix up the agreement of Chapo and him to kind of like give his side of the story and ironically Chapo and Mayo basically, agree that there was a misunderstanding. Now, imagine that, there's a misunderstanding. We killed your cousin, 11 of his guys, and we killed, his brother in law, but now we're good again. It was ironic to a point where Noel was one of the persons that actually, he put in a good word for me and all that. And then later on, for me to be like the person that actually does him the favor and vouches for him, and I saved his life on one occasion, and it's just crazy, He ended up getting extradited to the United States eventually for
Wait,
like
wait, wait. Whose life you saved? This guy right here?
no, he was dead already. Noel Salgueros,
So you ain't gonna tell us that story?
and Flaco. That's like too
You
long of a story.
motherfucker.
Buddy Chapo. My buddy had information that he was working with the Tijuana gang. My dad had him called to Culiacan.
The reason and how they got their information was that they had information someone had given them, so they tapped his phone. And his father and my game, from my understanding, said, "Look, if we bring him in, he has a good reason. We're gonna let him live because he liked them." But the fact that he came in and when they told him, they confronted him, he lied again, so they killed him.
They handcuffed me. My dad interrogated him and Tico admitted that he had betrayed them. My dad ordered him killed. Do you know Jose Luis Santiago Vasconcelos? I know who he is. He was the attorney general for the drug cartel. Once again, the son of E Mayo Zambada was talking about an important figure in the Mexican government. Since 1993, Vasconcelos had been his legal attorney for international affairs in Guadalajara. My dad and my buddy Chapo were talking about killing him. El Chapo was angry because Vasconcelos had arrested his son Ivan in Guadalajara without any grounds. Ivan was not involved in the business, the witness said. The decision was made to kill Vasconcelos. My dad warned them that if they did it there would be a lot of trouble, that they should wait and see what happened to Ivan, but Cancelos treated him badly. So he ordered his execution. My friend Chapo sent some people, ex-military personnel, to Mexico City with bazookas. We called it Guatemala. They found a place where there were no cameras on the street and where Vasconcelos was going to pass through, but the people were arrested before the attack, the same day that the attack was going to take place. When did that happen? Before 2006, at the end of 2005. Guzman Lowe he looked for Vicentillo and he turned to look at his friend. He smiled at him. El Chapo remained very serious, without taking his eyes off him. How many times did you meet with Juancho? I saw him hundreds, thousands of times. I spoke to him 98% of the time, face to face. We were always together in the same house or office. How did you refer to Juancho? Virgo, I would call him in private. The prosecutor then presented several intercepted telephone recordings.
What you're hearing is a motherfucker snitching. Okay? Miss me with the bullshit, miss me with the picking and choosing. My dad ordered him to be unalived. My dad and so were talking about him being unalived. This one got unalived. Listen, what you're hearing is a dude snitching. Stop picking and choosing. It's part of the game. It's in the toolbox.
Oh my God! Are we saying that we're, my brother and I are not the only snitches?
That's what it seems like on my channel. That's the only reason I confront it, because the truth is the truth.
States. This is me talking to one of the Flores brothers about the toys and weapons they were going to send us.
Oh shit! They got a recording of me talking to the floor. Like
Let's
him
go. I
talking
want to hear the fucking recording. You ain't gonna tell us the fucking
Damn.
story. We gotta hear something.
This is me talking to one of the Flores brothers about the toys and weapons they were going to send us from the United States. Mayo's son said in a tone of astonishment. And with that, Prosecutor Discam ended her questioning. Eduardo Balareso left the table of Chapo's defense team to take the stage. From 1993 to 2001, Chapo Guzman was locked up in prison and you said you spoke with him. With his brother Pollo, he spoke with Pollo. I was with him when he did it. Do you know who El Mochimo is? I know him. He's Arturo Beltrán Leyva. You always knew that your father was a drug trafficker, right? I realized when I was 13 or 14. Your father, El Mayo, ordered many people to be killed and kidnapped. That's right, Dot. So why do you deny that your father, Mayo, is the head of the Sinaloa cartel? I'm not denying that my father is the head of the cartel. I'm saying that my dad is one of the bosses along with my buddy Chapo. You're just talking about what suits you, right? It's impossible to remember 100% of what happened. I have no reason to lie. I'm telling you about my life, what I experienced in the cartel. I'm asking you complicated questions. No. Well, I'm going to ask you simple questions for idiots. You're here because you consider the person you call my buddy Chapo, my friend Chapo, guilty. Isn't that right? No, not because I'm sitting here. My friend is guilty. I'm giving my testimony. The jury has to decide. Guzman Loera's lawyer looked exasperated, annoyed, because he couldn't get the Vicentillo guy out of his mind, who had an iron attitude. Cool, as the young people on the streets of Brooklyn would say, or with cold blood and nerve, to paraphrase Truman Capote. The interrogator was putting on a kind of show in the judge's chambers. He moved throughout the courtroom, standing very close to and in front of Vicentillo, positioning himself on one side of the prosecutor's table or in front of the jury. He even walked up to the defendant and put his hand on his shoulder. The defense attorney wanted to shock the jury and anger Vicentillo, but he didn't seem to achieve any of that. Why is he here to accuse and betray him? He refers to Mr. Guzman as comrade, or compadre Chapo. Of course I do. He calls me compadre Vicente. Your Honor, you can tell the witness that you are not referring to the defendant when you say compadre Chapo. You can't, the judge replied. The lawyer resumed the questions. Do you know General Miranda? Yes, sir. General Miranda is a division general. Balareso seemed pleased with the answer. Did you meet with General Miranda at Los Pinos? Yes, sir. I met with him when he was chief of the Presidential General Staff in the government of President Ernesto Chedillo. Did your father bribe President?
I just wanted you to know, like right here, this is like there's more parts of this, but just to highlight, he's basically saying that he went to the Mexican White House to have a meeting with the executive staff about whatever he needed his father and the higher staff of the government to do. And that's insane. Give me like it's crazy that he's testifying to this. Just kind of shows the level of corruption and up to where it actually leads to, when you have the third in command and one of the biggest jugglers in the world's son going to the presidential palace to meet with the executive staff of the president of Mexico's office at the time, which was President Cedillo's, which is crazy.
Chedillo? No. My dad never told me that. Holding up the transcript of the statements Vicentillo gave to the United States government since he became a protected witness, Balaro joked,
Oh shit. Shy, did I hear that correctly? That the third in command became a protected witness? Oh my god, I didn't know.
Mayo Zambada sent his baby to Los Pinos to complain to General Miranda that the government was meddling in the business of one of his wives, Rosario Niebla Cardosa, Vicentillo's mother. The capo frowned, clearly annoyed by the irony. Yes, and to my entire family, Vicentillo emphasized. For years, pointed out by the Mexican press as the prince of the faction of the Sinaloa cartel, led by Mayo, he established that his mother owned a company in Culiacan that did not have any money from the drug business. It started with money my grandfather left him. Valoriso returned to the subject of bribes. He wanted to show that his client was not the head of the cartel, but rather Mayo. He asked Zambada if his father bribed Yankees and CIA personnel. The witness emphatically answered yes, and that he also did it with the directors of the state judicial police. He bribed half the country. Valoriso asked sarcastically, "Yes, if you say it now. You say that you have not had any communication with Mayo since his arrest, right? Through lawyers, yes. The bribes that Mayo made were to avoid being arrested. Yes. The United States government offers a reward of $5 million for information leading to the capture of Mayo. That was since I was out. Since you began cooperating with the government, you have met more than 100 times with the prosecutors. Correct? Yes, sir. They ask me many questions about my father. Have they asked you where your father is? Yes, I tell them that he is in the mountains. I have given them the coordinates of ranches, houses, all the information.
Damn.
That boy, hey, y'all be bringing up the twins' father all the time in a self-serving way, and this motherfucker over here giving coordinates on his daddy. No mommy's way. It's crazy. It's crazy the double standard and the motherfucking picking and choosing that motherfuckers do around here. That shit is nuts.
It's crazy because just to hear it, it sounds a little bit different. But again, you know,
He said, I gave my daddy's coordinate. Now, right or wrong, the daddy and everybody else done had a meeting with these boys, right? With all these youngsters and told them, hey, when the shit hits the fan, did they do that prior to your, they did that prior to your cooperation, right?
he's gonna talk about this right now.
Huh?
He's gonna talk about this right now. So let's
Okay,
go.
go ahead.
We'll keep
Go ahead. Do
About
your thing.
airstrips. Your father has many girlfriends. I do not specifically remember a girlfriend of my father's. Chapo's lawyer was overacting. It seemed like he was trying to imitate Purpura, but without success. The tone of his questions, his movements and grimaces.
You see, right here, we didn't get to see which lawyers actually cross-examining him. You get me? They never mentioned that. They're just saying that he's acting like trying to act like him, but we don't know who's actually the lawyer cross-examining him in the stand. So
Showed his improvisation and his eagerness to impress the jury and the reporters. If you've given them all the information about where your father could be hiding, why haven't they arrested him? If they haven't arrested him, it's not my fault, he replied, causing laughter from those present, including Chapo. The only ones who didn't laugh were the prosecutors, who were exposed as incompetent or in collusion with El Mayo. If this capo's son gave them reliable information about his possible whereabouts and it's assumed that precisely because they trusted him, they presented him as a witness, then it was the fault of the United States government for not being able to capture him. He communicates with his father. I have no way of communicating with him in Mexico. How come your lawyers find him? My father finds the lawyers, not the lawyers him. While you were in prison here in the United States, you spoke on the phone with your father. The DEA agents told you so. You're going to deny it. They took me out of my cell at midnight and put me on the phone with my father. They took me to an office so I could talk to him. That was in 2012 when you were in a Chicago prison. Yes, sir. How long did you talk to your father? A few minutes, I don't know exactly how many. What did your father ask you?
damn, just to get you some insight, man. We're talking about the biggest juror in the world, who everyone's looking for, especially the government. What they say, and they actually took his son out and arranged for him to be able to talk to his father.
That he and my friend Chapo were going to help me get out. The government had your father's phone number. I imagine they did.
So you didn't give them your father's number, Chapo, sorry, your father's, you.
See, sometimes we make mistakes, said Vicentillo, causing an explosion of laughter until the judge had to restrain those present so that the questioning could continue.
But I guess he made a mistake, but we can't really hear that he said I gave him Chapo's number. Well, listen, obviously there's a picture of Pete. It's not the best picture of him. I don't believe that looks like me either.
You guys share a face, so if that looks like Pete, that looks like you, motherfucker.
Later I learned that the call was made through my lawyers. After that there were no more calls. The call was for him to ask his father, Mayo, to turn himself in. Yes, I sent him a message asking him to turn himself in, but he didn't. sometimes collaborators come. At that point, yes, it was in 2007 when Mayo began to communicate with the idea to tell them that he wanted to collaborate. No, it was my friend Chapo who sought them out. It wasn't Mayo or me.
So look what he said right here. He said El Chapo sought the government out. Okay.
That was before you were arrested in March 2009. Indirectly. Yes, sir, they
sought you out because they wanted a deal.
I wanted to leave the cartel with the permission of my father and my friend Chapo. Chapo and my father suggested that I turn myself into the DIA. I wanted to retire, there was no other way. For a short time I went to Europe, to Canada, but because of my father's problems I always had to return to Mexico. Your father, Mayo, put you in touch with the DIA. Through my friend Chapo's contact so that I could leave the cartel. What did the deal you were seeking with the DEA consist of? Passing them information about enemy cartels. You made the decision to seek out the DIA.
Damn, so he was fucking snitching? Oh, wow. Before he got caught? Oh, my God. I wonder if everyone in the chat actually knew this.
Before he
Because
got caught?
Before he got caught.
Oh, man. So that means that him getting caught had nothing to do with his snitching. It was a preemptive strike.
Yeah, he said it was Chapo put it together. Chapo put it together. His father said, okay.
I did it with the authorization of my father and my friend Chapo. Chapo had indirect communication with the DIA. You only?
He said he had indirect communication with the DEA.
What the did you say?
English, motherfucker.
He had direct communication with the DEA.
Ah, okay, I heard you.
Going to give DIA agents information about enemies of your father's organization? Yes, he was the target so that the Mexican and United States governments could fight the battles for the Sinaloa cartel. He gave them information about Arturo Beltrán Leyva.
Look, that's Vicente at the airport. But look, right here. He gave him information about Arturo Beltrán Leyva. Look, check this out.
Yes, sir. He gave them his phone number so they could track him down and capture him. When did you meet with DIA agents? Hours before my arrest, I met with 2 DIA agents. They kept him isolated for 2 years in the hole. Right? Correct. In the hole, they kept him in torture-like conditions. Yes, sir. They wouldn't let me talk to my family, to my wife. It was a while before they let me talk to her once or twice. We cried together when we talked on the phone. I was dead inside. My wife came to see me once. They gave me a 3-day permit to be in the United States. Vicentillo admitted to the jury that after the inhumane treatment he
His wife is American, too, and his sons are all American. His family, his kids are all American, too.
received from the DIA, he gave in. In November 2012, he pleaded guilty and began providing information about the operations of the Sinaloa cartel, the businesses of El Mayo Zambada, El Chapo, and the other drug traffickers in the organization. Zambada Jr. claimed not to have any property or money in the United States. He said he was aware that his testimony against El Chapo could favor him, although everything would depend on the judge who decided his judicial future. As a protected witness, he managed to get the Treasury Department to remove his wife from the OFAC list, which allowed him to obtain a visa and settle.
He's a protected witness. And he managed to get his wife off.
Near Milan, Wisconsin, where Vicentillo is being held. U.S. authorities allowed May Zambada's daughter-in-law to take $400,000 to the United States to support herself and pay for her children's education. You stated that Carlos Salinas de Gortari was in bed with the Felix Arellano's. Bolaro suddenly asked Vicentillo. No, sir, I don't know about that. The lawyer argued before the jury that the governments of Mexico and the United States inflated Guzman Lora's image to protect the real boss of the Sinaloa cartel, Ismael Zambada Garcia. Valoriso then presented the photograph of Vicente Zambada Niebla's brothers, Ismael Zambada Imperial, El Maito Gordo and Serafin Zambada Ortiz. Vicentillo admitted that he knew that his brothers were arrested for drug trafficking, but he was unaware that Serafin spent 66 months in prison and that he gave information to the Department of Justice. I left him at school when I was arrested, confessed the eldest son of Mayo Zambada.
There it is.
There it is, guys. Basically, it's crazy because, like, 90% of the people that are mentioned when it comes to everywhere from Damason to the Colombians. And it's crazy that even if we didn't meet them at the time, because, you know what? It's weird. What I didn't hear, we were hearing the English version of it, because there was a part that was being mixed where they're gonna detail about all the people we work with, where he's gonna say like they work with Los Cabreras from Durango, with Juancho, and he's gonna list the names. You get me? Of Jose Tirso, and also Hermano Olivares, um, and so many people. And he states himself like it's too many people to count, but they were associated with all these people that were like important in the cartel. Um, some of these people we never get into like speaking about details because a lot of people don't know them. But they're becoming a little bit more relevant. This is probably the perfect environment because I don't always remember this stuff, only if it comes up. And that's why this video it kind of made me like
It
reminisce a little
triggered
bit.
thoughts.
Yeah, trigger thoughts for sure. Absolutely. You said it best right now. And I think I was like, oh, this is a great video. You get me? To kind of highlight. And you could imagine that this is like a really bad version of it because it's only recounting his notes or his memory of this reporter. So like,
And
if we
what
were to
they're asking him specifically.
yeah. And if we were to go down to the transcript, which I think I just gotta find them, but they're out there of these transcripts. And you know what? Like, what I think would be very interesting would be to get the transcript of Jose Tirso, who was another big witness, in that case. Damason Lopez, who was another big witness in that case, just to kind of get their point of view, and they're gonna talk a little bit about uh, our criminal organization, and there's so many stories we could talk about that. So it's just crazy. You hear them pointing out like some of the people that they gave up as well.